Good evening, ghoulies and ghosties and long-leggedy beasties. This is Alex, coming at you from the underworld, and welcome back to another episode of... Before I get started, I just want to say Happy Pride, everyone. Also, I want to say thank you to those who have given me recommendations to read in regards to books and authors who are a part of the GLBTQ plus horror community. I've taken those recommendations to heart and have expanded my library out, so hopefully this time next year I'll have more of a diversity to pick from. Now, as far as recommendations are concerned, I want to give a special shout out to 3 wonderful people in this video, because without them, I'm not certain I would have read this weekend's book as quickly as what I did. So I would like to say thank you to Elaine Honey, as well as the booktuber Hey Little Thrifter, and the YouTuber Cami Roebuck, which for those last 2, I've provided links for their YouTube pages in the description section of this video, so be sure to check them out. And as far as this weekend's book is concerned, I'm reviewing The Elementals by Michael McDowell, and even though there aren't any same-sex or transgendered characters in this book, Michael McDowell was a big name within the gay horror community. And with this book, I was really surprised to see how well he could blend horror and comedy and have a good balance for it. And this was my first time ever reading him, and it totally will not be my last. So, without further ado, let's go in and jump into what this 80s paranormal classic has in store for us. Unfortunately, I don't have a print copy of The Elementals by Michael McDowell, but it is available in print, ebook, and audio, so getting your hands on a copy is not hard to do whatsoever. Now, this book opens up introducing 2 old-blood Alabama families by the name of the McRaes and the Savages. Also, there's a side character by the name of Odessa, who is the maid for the Savage family. And everyone is gathered because the matriarch of the Savage family, who is named Marion, has recently passed away, so everyone's at her funeral paying their respects. Well, after the funeral's over, they end up going to the Savage household, and this is where we learn that Marion's son Dothan has planned for everyone to go to Belledine, Alabama the following day. Which, Belledine is where their beachfront property is, and this is where they've spent all of their summers, and it's also where the 2 families met as neighbors and became really great friends. So, the next day comes, and they all go down to Belledine, and this is where the youngest family member of the McRae family, who is named India, becomes infatuated by one of the 3 antebellum homes on that property. Which, this is the antebellum home where it's been just left in disarray, it's abandoned, and also there's this huge sand dune that's covered half of the home. Well, even though she's interested in this location, her father tells her to stay away from it because it's dangerous, and it just scared the hell out of him as a kid. Well, as the story progresses, we see that India becomes more and more interested by this home, and as she starts investigating it a little bit more, we discover that something resides in that home that never existed in human form. And at night we see where shadows and lights go around in the windows of this residence, and also the sand dunes that are within and around the home can form into figures that are bloodthirsty. So now, if they don't get out of that property soon, everyone's gonna die. Published in 1981, The Elementals was Michael McDowell's 4th paperback from Avon Books, and it was nominated for the Audie Award for Paranormal. In the 1980s, McDowell had been dubbed as the master of the paperback original, which on the original cover of The Elementals, Stephen King praised that McDowell's next book couldn't come soon enough. Although in the video I did for Algernon Blackwood's book called The Willows, I elaborated on what an elemental was, McDowell provided his subtle take on these spirits as he suggests they are dimensional hallucinations that live between earth, air, fire, and water. Also, they are the formation of human weakness and sorrow, and they can replicate human beings. Fun facts. Here's a few things you might not know about Michael McDowell. Also, here's some sad news as well. In Faces of Fear by Douglas E. Winter, McDowell said he discovered teaching and writing took the same degree of energy. Because of this, he took the job of a secretary so he could take his writing more seriously. Then he admitted it was a foolish move as few authors succeed and income is hard to live by. Aside from books, McDowell was the writer of Tim Burton classics like Beetlejuice and The Nightmare Before Christmas. And aside from horror, McDowell wrote gay murder mystery novels under the pseudonym Nathan Aldean. Now, time for some bad news. Unfortunately, Michael McDowell passed away in 1999 from AIDS. Now that we have all of that covered, it's time to move on to the spoilers section of this video, which if you've never read this book before, I'm about to reveal some scenes and character development that could ruin the experience for you. If you wish to skip this section, just scroll down to my comments and you'll see a pinned comment at the top. If you click on the timestamp that's located inside of that comment, it will redirect you to the thoughts section. If you want to do this, you only have 17 seconds. So ready, set, go. Since everyone has had an opportunity to click away, I want to talk about a few of my favorite scenes in the Elementals. And the first one that comes to mind is in the prologue where we are at Marion's funeral. And as I mentioned, we have only the immediate family of Marion's there, as well as the McRae immediate family and the maid known as Odessa. Other than them, no one else is allowed in there, not even the pallbearers. And the reason why is because the Savage family has this really strange, ritual that dates back to God only knows when. And what happens is you have where Dothan and his sister go up to their mother's coffin and they drive a knife into her heart. And this is really a WTF moment because I'm like, I just didn't see it coming. It just wasn't expected whatsoever. And as the story progresses, we learn that this is done to ensure that she was not buried alive. And this dates back to when Mobile, Alabama wasn't even a place yet, and the Savage family had settled in the area, and one of their relatives, which was a mother and child, they had ended up getting buried because they had died. And a year later, the father of that child died, so they opened up the mausoleum where they had placed mother and child to discover that the mother had actually been buried alive while her child was in fact dead. And to try to sustain, she ended up eating her own dead baby. But of course, she was buried alive, so by that time, she was dead. And from here, this is where the custom began, where the family of the Savages would receive a knife at birth, and it would be that very same knife that was used to stab them in the heart when they died. So that was really gothic and really cool, kind of gross, but fun. And some of my other favorite scenes take place in Belledine, Alabama, and this is, of course, in regards to the third house. Now, the first moment that regards the third home that I really thought was kick-ass is the moment where you have India taking photos of the third house, and Odessa is telling her where to stand to get the perfect shot. Well, when India gets her photos back, she discovers that there are things in the photos that she did not see with her naked eye, such as one image shows this skeleton running out of frame. Another one shows a creepy hand just coming out from behind a curtain behind one of the windows. Then there's this horrible elephant fetus thing that's kind of just hunched down on the bottom part of the home. And the creepiest image of them all is this elemental that's taken on the form of Marion, and on her shoulder is Marion's dead bird. But these are just a few of the things that the elementals can shift into. And I really like this because it allows us to see the diversity that the elementals can just take on. And also it made me realize that this could honestly go anywhere at any time. Now, aside from that, the ending was kick-ass. And what happens here is earlier in the book, you have where Odessa tells India that at one point, India is going to have to eat her eyeballs so she can gain her vision. Well, at the end of the book, Odessa sneaks into the third house to try to kill the elementals, and she does this alone. However, India sees her sneaking off to the third house, so she grabs a meat cleaver and a knife and follows her to try to help her out. Well, once she gets inside, she finds that Odessa has been killed and her eyeballs have been removed. So, of course, India eats her eyeballs and gains, like, her vision and powers and all that good stuff. Well, what happens from here is all hell breaks loose because India's dad comes in to try to retrieve her, and they discover where Dothan has been murdered by this thing that looks like Marion, and also there's like this gigantic version of her dead bird, and the bird is like just squawking about how savage mothers eat their children, and India wastes no time with this. She just jumps on top of Marion and starts hacking her to pieces with the meat cleaver, and then when they haul ass, they just see all these other things that are coming out of the sand and trying to attack them, and it is a very intense ending. And when they finally get out of the house, they do what I would have done the first time I noticed something wrong with that place, which was to get the hell out of Dodge. I want to use this opportunity to bitch about Lawton, who is Big Barbara's husband. Now, the first thing you need to know about this rat bastard is he's a politician, which means you can't trust his sorry ass to start with. And secondly, he's the kind of person who saves face for public, but behind closed doors, you can tell he suffers from short dick syndrome. But that's beside the point. Anywho, I understand that Barbara is an alcoholic, and if I was married to this shithead, I'd be an alcoholic too. I mean, hell, he's cheating on her with another woman, and plus, no matter what she does, is never good enough for him, and she tries her damnedest to please him too. Now, she does actually kick the habit of being an alcoholic, and after that's happened, she ends up going to a political shindig with him where they're playing the happy married couple. Well, she ends up making a joke that offends him, and instead of him being a good person and simply forgiving her, he ridicules her. And then he says that he's going to divorce her because she's nothing but an embarrassment and she might as well just drink herself to death. Which, of course, this causes her to pick the bottle back up, but of course, her loved ones come in there and they uplift her and pull her out of the rut that this asshole has put her back in. Now, my problem with this is I honestly wish Lawton would not have had the opportunity to divorce her. I wish that Barbara would have just stepped up and said, I divorce you, you piece of shit. But no, that didn't happen. And at the very least, he died in the third house. But still, I wish Big Barbara would have just gone batshit cray-cray on his ass just one good time. I really liked Michael McDowell's ability to create character within his atmosphere. And as far as this is concerned, some great examples regard the historic church where Marion's funeral took place, as well as the cemeteries and the mausoleums, which all of this felt like nothing but just pure good old-fashioned Southern goth. And even though I've never been on a beach in Alabama before, when McDowell was describing the shores in Belledine, it honestly made me feel like I was sitting on a porch just looking over the beach and sipping on like a mint julep or something like that. So his ability to create scene and take the reader and put them in that scene is superb. And another one of his great abilities is his character development, because what we see is a mass of just diverse characters that all come together and they act off of one another well, where it just feels very organic. And I noticed where a lot of the comedic relief of this book was through the dialogue, which it honestly felt like what would happen if Beetlejuice met Steel Magnolias. So that was really fun to see. And as far as the comedic relief goes, most of this is delivered by Lucre, which his daughter is one of my favorite characters in the book, and her name is India. And we see where she is kind of like a premeditation for Lydia Dietz from Beetlejuice. And another favorite character of mine was Odessa, which she kind of comes off as like this black female version of Van Helsing. And even though that's kick-ass and everything, there is a trope that happens that I really just didn't like, but at the same time, it did not take away from my enjoyment of the book overall. Now, as far as the commentary is concerned, I notice where the Elementals focuses on dysfunctional families and broken homes. And we see this from mild to extreme, which I can't give away too much here without there being some spoilers, so I'm just going to lightly touch this subject. But we see how with India and her father, for example, they have a good relationship, but it's more of a friend relationship versus a parent-child relationship. And because of this, she always calls her father by his first name. Then we have the savage mothers, who are seen as these tyrannical individuals where all of the males of the family are submissive and docile. And we also see alcoholism there, especially from Barbara's standpoint, and how substance abuse can be caused by a toxic spouse, which her husband is the complete reason why she continues drinking the way she does. And when I compared both of the families, it was really interesting to see how the Savages had the dominant women and the submissive men versus the McRaes, where you had the dominant men and the submissive women. And out of all of the dysfunction going on here, we see that the children of these families have a better hope for them. It's almost like we can see that they've learned from the generation before them, so they could be better parents, or at least try to be better parents. So that was really interesting to be able to analyze and look into. And while this was all going on, I loved how the commentary continued strong, but at the same time, we had an equally strong gothic ghost story, and it all just blended together for a book that I could not put down. I absolutely love The Elementals because it was fast-paced, it was fun, there was tons of comedic relief as well as just creepy scenes, and even though I wasn't frightened or grossed out by this work whatsoever, it's totally one of my top favorite books now, and even though I've never read McDowell before, I can honestly say this is a great first book to read by that author because I did enjoy it just so very much, and I do look forward to reading his other books after having finished this one. So yes, I do highly recommend this title, and I do recommend that you read it during summer because it has that whole summer vibe to it, and I do feel that it is suitable for adults and young adults, which when I say young adults, I really mean people who are 13 and up, because it really doesn't feel like there's anything that's overly explicit, but at the same time, it's a little too extreme for anyone under that age of 13. So yes, give this a shot. Before I move on to the questions section of this video, I would just like to say I totally forgot this weekend was Father's Day weekend. So if you're a dad, happy Father's Day. And even if you're just the dad of a fur baby, happy Father's Day as well, because I feel like that counts. Now, in regards to the holiday, my mom was on when Mother's Day rolled around, and I posed a question that not only paid respects to the book I just reviewed, but it was a question that she could elaborate on as well. And I did want to do the same thing for my dad, but I couldn't think of a question that paid respects to this weekend's book while it being a question that he could respond to and give a lengthy response. So for that reason, I'm probably going to have him on at a later date where I have a different question he can speak about, because I would much rather just kind of put that on the back burner a second versus having him come on and just being on here a few seconds and then jumping on to another subject. So just know it'll happen in the near future, and once again, sorry I forgot to mention Father's Day, but happy Father's Day. So now let's move on to the questions, which the first question I have is, what is a horror book you would recommend that takes place on the beach? Load up the comments. My second question is, what is a Gothic style that you prefer to read? Like, do you prefer American Gothic? Do you prefer Southern Gothic? Or do you prefer, like, British Gothic? Why? As far as myself is concerned, I really enjoy Southern Gothic because it seems mysterious and haunting, but at the same time it feels really rich. So I really gravitate towards Southern Gothic when it comes down to horror stories. But I do also consider Southern Gothic to be a part of American Gothic, so two birds with one stone, maybe? And I do love British Goth, don't get me wrong, because it feels like it's something to enjoy during the cold weather. Like when I pick up a British Goth horror novel, it feels like I should be able to look out the window and just see nothing but a gray, cold sky and just cuddle up in a blanket, sip some coffee and tea, and just be able to enjoy the atmosphere and the story. And so I really love all types of Gothic literature, but Southern Goth is my go-to when it comes down to seeking it out. But with that said, let's go on and move on to closing out the video, which I would like to say thank you to Lisa G and Joseph Baylott for contributing to my Patreon account. If you would like to contribute as well, the link for my Patreon is in the description section of this video. All you have to do is just click that link, and for $5 a month, I'll give you a shout out at the end of my videos. And for $10 a month, you'll still get that shout out, but I'll also send you over one photo per month of my photography, which I do creepy photography on the side, and you're welcome to print that off and do whatever you want with it. If you can do that, that's great, but if you can't contribute, that's also cool. All I hope is you continue returning to this channel so we can have a good time. And if you would like to connect with me on social media, links for my Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram are all available in the description section as well. And if you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, be sure to subscribe and hit that notifications bell because I have more book reviews coming in the near future. And until we see each other again, I hope you have a wonderful week and sweet nightmares.